Hey, everybody, welcome to today's episode of the What Worked For You show. Today, we're going to talk about a number of subjects because our guest has got an extensive array of expertise, but the unifying thing across all her skills and her accomplishments, and it's something that applies to you as an entrepreneur no matter what you do: grit, toughness, pushing through and never stopping pushing, even when you don't even know what something holding you back might be. And we, as entrepreneurs, we've all felt that. It's like we feel like we're fighting an invisible wall. Our guest today has conquered the wall again and again and again to create the success she has, both in the business world and now as a business owner. So let's dive in. Melanie Cook, thank you for being on the show today. How are you?
I'm doing well, Frank. Thank you for inviting me to participate.
Wonderful. Let's dive in. You've been recognized as an Ernst& Young Entrepreneur of the Year. Congratulations. Or finalist. I don't know if you won or not, but so you're a finalist. I don't know if you're a finalist. That's
Finalist.
good enough, right?
Yes.
Also, I saw, nominated as one of the top 50 of NASDAQ's diverse board candidates. My question to you, when you get these types of awards, distinctions, nominations, what is it about your leadership from your perspective that sets you apart?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. One, we've had tremendous growth. We've been in business for 9 years now, and we've gone, I don't disclose all of our revenue, but we have more than doubled our revenue in a 3-year span of time. And we are in at the top of the year, we were supporting about 10 different countries, and we had people in about 10 different countries. And so just in terms of being able to manage at that level and manage a diverse workforce, all remote. And I think what also distinguished me is that grit that you talked about. The grit is something that helps us to perform at a very high level. So a lot of my business originally came from relationships that I had developed, and my reputation was that of very hard worker and someone who produced high quality work. And so just making sure that when problems inevitably happen, Frank, that we resolve them quickly and we make sure that we give the customer what they've paid for and hopefully some more. But I think those are the things that distinguish me. I have a very niche area. I worked in the industry for 14 years and I started a company and I modeled it so that I could take advantage of all that information that I knew. So I know how to source candidates to support this customer. I know how to select them in terms of whether or not they will fit in the environment, and fit is very important. So all those nuances, I would say my experiences in various different arenas, I bring to the table.
So let's talk about those different arenas real quick. And you said you have people, I think if I understood you correctly, 10 different countries. Now, I know from my former IT days, I worked in it was a mid-sized company. We had offices in, I think, 7 countries, I believe. The idea of grit varied per country. Now, this was back, we're going back a ways. So I don't know what it is today, but I never forget, like, United States IT support person, hey, if you're going to work into the evening, overnight, it was like you was just part of it, right? But in some countries, it's like, oh, it's 4:30. We're out. We're going to the pub. See you tomorrow. And we're like, wait a
Right.
minute. We got work to do. No, no, no. That's not how they work. How, like, what kind of things have you come across where your idea of grit versus somebody on the international side is different, and how do you reconcile those differences? Because it could be as simple as just cultural differences.
So when we start looking at a contract, when we're given the opportunity to bid on a contract, we start doing our research then and we try to understand the cultural norms. And we understand that the usual workday in America does not necessarily look the same. People may work harder. They may have a different approach to work, cultural. societal norms may play a role in how work is performed and what the expectations are. So on the front end, we do a very good job of understanding what those norms are by doing our research, by talking to people who have also worked there, by talking to the candidates that we put forth to make sure they understand. And then we have monthly meetings with our customers. And so that allows us to hear that feedback and to get that feedback and to ask those questions about how things are going. And it gives us the opportunity to course correct immediately. But the biggest thing, Frank, is just having that dialogue, having an open dialogue, and us being open to understanding that culture does play a large role in how business is done across the world. Fortunately, language has not been an issue for us even in some countries where there may be another language that is the dominant language, all of our team members also speak English. So we have that ability to communicate with them to make sure they're delivering. The other thing that we try to do, we have a number of contracts across the continent of Africa. And so last year I did hire a project manager to manage all those projects who lives in South Africa. Unfortunately, with all the changes in government this year, we did have to, we no longer have that person in place, but that was one of our value adds is that that helped to bridge the time zone difference. And she herself was American and South African. So she understood the cultural norm. So she was able to kind of bridge some gaps for us.
It's a beautiful country. I was there. I mean, it's been over 10 years since I've been there, but it was a beautiful country.
It is.
Very cool place. Some extraordinarily kind people.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things I've found is, and I'm not a world traveler by any stretch, but I've visited a few places, and one of the things I've appreciated is people are kind most places you go. It's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so let's talk about that for a moment. You're working with people internationally, you got the culture, the work habit, the this, the that. Do you, is, how challenging is it to kind of get everybody kind of on the same page when you're working with client A, client B, client C? Because I would imagine, and I could be wrong, that each client will not only have its own challenges, but then you're managing the team and it's like, woo, and then you're throwing the international in. How big of a challenge is that?
Well, what we try to do, Frank, is we understand that being on the same page may be difficult because the page may be different. So, what we try to do is make sure that we understand what's necessary to be successful on our individual contracts. And then, of course, our project management office manages all the projects, project managers. So, he makes sure that they are on the same page in terms of how they manage the project, but that looks different for everybody. We work in some secure facilities. We work with some confidential information. So there may be some varying degrees of visibility. And so we have to respect that. Most of our team members work on site, they work alongside our customers. So we understand that delicate balance that they have to understand what are the norms for that particular contract. So it's very individualized.
Got it. You mentioned, going back to South Africa for a moment, you mentioned government changes impacted
Mhm.
what you had going on. Can you elaborate on that?
So, as I'm sure you are aware, and Doge cut out a lot of contracts earlier this year, January, February, March, and we had some contracts that were eliminated because of that, and as a result, we had to do what the government did. We had to have a reduction in force, and that was the first time we've had to do that, and it was very tough. It was hard to let people go. And we had to find ways to work around those gaps. So we embraced AI to the largest extent possible to help fill those gaps. The people that are on the team, they had to double down, and we had to find other ways to get more work done with less time and less resources. But once again, that grit came into play where it was daunting, but I knew that it had to be done. And we also had to have compassion for some of our customers because they were on the end of a reduction in force and not knowing what their future was going to look like. So at the same time that we were going through our changes, we wanted to be compassionate and sensitive to our customers. And so it taught us a lot about managing the intangible in business. And so, moving forward, those are lessons that we will take into others that we've taken into other situations actually already. And it's given us a level of compassion for our customers. I would tell the project managers check in, be sympathetic. Don't lead with, well, what's going to happen to our contract? Lead with, how are you doing?
Mm.
Because they may not even have known what was going to happen with our contract. So we're a people-based business. So that was very important to me.
No, I love that. It's people based, and there's always going to be intangibles, right? Like, and I appreciate the clarity because I wasn't sure if it was a U.S. government, foreign government, so it
Mhm.
sounds like it was
Mhm.
U.S. So,
Yes.
um, and those are intangibles, right? Like, and I'm in real estate, for example. About 2, 3 years ago, they were like, "Oh, let's do the interest rate thing." Serious impact on my business. Like, I didn't consult the small entrepreneur, but that's okay. So
Mhm.
those intangibles are real, but I love how you use those to springboard into some pivots, in particular AI, which of course we now AI is the new buzzword, right? And we're all accepting that it is part of our new reality. What have you found to be the biggest benefits and the biggest challenges with AI in your experience?
So the biggest benefits are that it gets work done. I mean, it's depending on what you do and depending on how you get it done. So we have a secure environment. Obviously we don't put customers' information into, sensitive information into artificial intelligence. So initially it was more so internal work that we were getting done. And now we are exploring different types of workflows, integration models. How can we use AI to go into some of our systems and perform functions? And so that's kind of a new horizon for us. We are going into bigger contracts. And so if we have to, for example, if we have to hire 200 people, looking at that number of resumes, that may be literally 1,000 resumes that you may get. So we have to have some way of searching those resumes. And that's just an example of using AI to go into our system, our recruiting system, review those resumes, and tell us which ones we should interview. So that's a small kind of workflow issue, but it can return a lot in terms of saving time. And for a lot of marketing that I've done a tremendous amount of research around some new clients that we wanted to present to. So AI has been very helpful with that. And just learning how to use it has been fascinating to me. The biggest challenge I would say is making sure that everybody on the team has the same level of competency when it comes to AI. Because if you don't, then you're not going to get the same results. So I can have expectations, but they may not be realized. And it has its limitations. We definitely discovered that AI can hallucinate. But we found out why it was hallucinating, and we were able to have some workarounds. That's probably one of our biggest challenges. Another big challenge for us is, like I said, making sure that we don't put any customer sensitive information into our systems. And then figuring out, well, how are our customers going to use AI and how can we use AI to help our customers become more efficient? And so we can be more efficient on a contract and save them money. So that because when you think about a small business, most customers when they think about a small business, they think, oh, we're going to save more money by using a small business versus a big business. And so we have to figure out how to effectively use AI in a sensitive environment so we can help them save money and be more efficient.
So curious question. How do you ensure AI stays neutral? And what I mean by that is, I have seen where when you use it and you're just like having a conversation, so to speak, to figure out a problem. What can I do about this, whatever it may be. I've noticed AI, it'll start taking sides. It'll start like getting on your side, and I've literally had to tell it, no, 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 you need to stay objective. Don't like me because I'm the guy at the keyboard having this electronic chat with you, but to stay objective. Is that something you've run into? Because when you said hallucinate, I'm like, yeah, I've seen that too, where it's like, what, where did that come from?
Exactly,
So how do you
exactly.
how do you ensure it stays objective so that it's as efficient and as effective as possible?
Well, as you said, I have to tell it. I will say what its role is. I will say your role is an objective reviewer. Your role is an objective evaluator. Your role is an objective researcher. And then when I get information back, I may go through 4 iterations because I'll say that's not good enough. Dive deeper, think longer. I just kind of push back just to see how far it can push. And amazingly, as much as I push, it comes back with new content. So I know that the first pass is usually not the best pass. So and I talk to it like I would talk to someone who was doing the work for me. I would say, that's not good. I'm not sure where you got that from. Or, I will talk to it. Quite frankly, I'm an attorney by training. And so that's how my mentors and superiors used to talk to me, early on in my career. They would say, I don't know where you got this from. This makes no sense. And I would talk to AI just like that too. This makes no sense. And I think you have to be that way so that because it understands that. And like I said, it
Mm.
helps to iterate. But you're right, you do have to tell it to be objective.
And you don't get the emotional pushback. "Ah, it's just a computer." So,
Exactly. Good point. Good point, Frank.
yes, leave all the drama out of it. So, I did tell AI once, are you just being a drama queen? It's like, no, 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 I'm sorry. It's like apologizing to me. I'm like, what is wrong with you? But speaking of attorney, you worked in the SEC, you worked with the Department of Commerce, corporate boardrooms, and so forth. How did that work in leveraging that attorney work back in the day help you with running a company today?
So, the Securities and Exchange Commission was my first job out of law school. And for the first 3 years that I was there, I worked in the investment management division. So, in the New York office. So, our responsibility was to investigate fraud and misuse, abuse amongst investment advisors. And so that was very personal because most of the folks that were involved were small investors, families, just individuals. And so it helped me to really understand the market. And after that 3 years, I went to the general enforcement area. So as we call it, garden variety fraud, insider trading, failure to supervise, all those kinds of things. So what it helped me to do, Frank, is to understand Wall Street and understand how money works. So after that, I went to work at the Commerce Department and I understood how government plays a role in business and setting policies and being that player in the industry, that voice for sometimes the voiceless. And so I understood from that vantage point. And so when I got ready to go into business, I understood the big picture, and I was also able to understand government contracting after working at the Department of Commerce. I was able to understand finance. So when we acquired a company a few years ago, I had, even though it wasn't a public offering, I understood the transaction at a different level because I did work on Wall Street. Not only did I work at the SEC, but after I worked at the Commerce Department, I went to work for a small investment bank in New York. So once again, I like having different viewpoints because it helps me to be more objective. We're talking about AI being objective, but it's important for me to be objective as well and see things from different viewpoints so I can better understand my customer.
Well, being objective today and seeing different viewpoints, it's a still that, it's coming back into the national conversation as of late, and it's something that we
Mhm.
need because as the world is more it's interesting how sometimes it seems like the more connected the world is, it almost feels like at times there's less viewpoints when really there should be just that much more.
Right.
So it's an interesting thing to see how, as a society, we're evolving, and especially as infiltrated as tech is. Uh, so before all of this, like, How did you get into all this? Like, what is it that brought you into law, or did you do something before law?
No, law was the first part of my career. Growing up, I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to be a reporter. I wanted to be a news anchor on the 6 o'clock evening news.
Oh,
And when I when I got to college, I guess there were just a number of things that made me decide that I wanted to go to law school instead. And so, but I've always had a slant toward business. So I did my third year paper on the use of RICO and securities prosecutions. Um, Went to work for, SEC. So business was always kind of that thread for me, working at the Department of Commerce, going back to Wall Street, all those things. So the beautiful thing about working at the Department of Commerce, as I said before, it gave me an introduction to government contracting. So when I left Wall Street the second time, I came to Atlanta and decided to work for a company that was opening an Atlanta office of a DC-based government contracting organization. So it gave me the opportunity to learn. The company was really good about letting me see different viewpoints. I probably held 3 or 4 positions during the time that I worked there. And when I decided to leave the company, I realized that, I had developed massive information about how to make the business successful. I had developed relationships with customers. I love to talk. My father was a minister, so I know how to talk to anybody. And I do talk to anybody and everybody. And that actually worked in my favor.
yeah.
Being comfortable talking to people and figuring out problems, helping them solve problems. So that's really how I got to where I am. So I was very fortunate to have some mentors in the business that really showed me what it takes to be successful.
I love it. And I love that statement. I love to talk to people. It's such a simple statement, but it's so relevant. It's a beautiful thing. So I love that. So speaking of talking to people, just
Mhm,
kind of camping there for a moment, you mentioned the Department of Commerce.
mhm,
So, I guess it was roughly a year ago, I had a guest who he was a contractor and but he had worked with government contracts with Department of Defense as well as private sector contracts on the contracting side. But you were on the Department of Commerce side and you were introduced to government contracts. What did you see? Like, did you work with private contracts as well as just, well, and when I say private contractors in the private space versus just government contracts as well? Because you always hear the stereotypes, working with the government, it's hard, but then some people are like, well, we love it, there's just a million loopholes. Like, what's your experience from the Department of Commerce side?
So, from the Department of Commerce side, I was on the agency side at that point. So I saw things from a different vantage point. We use contractors. I didn't really understand the inner workings of what it meant to be a government contractor, but I learned that. And everything you said is correct. There are a
Okay.
lot of loopholes. Government contracting is dictated and organized by law, the Federal Acquisition Regulation. So that's what drives government contracting. So that gave me being able to understand that regulation, gave me kind of a fundamental understanding when I started. But I had to take my lawyer hat off, and I always had to have a
Mhm.
business hat on because those are two different things. And so yes, we do have some private sector customers. We probably started bringing on private sector customers around year 3, and we're in year 9 now. And so we try to have a nice balance of we have some local government work. Well, actually, we support a local government. We don't have any state government work. We have federal agencies. We work with health systems. We work with pharmaceutical companies. We work with academic institutions, nonprofits. So we try to make sure that we have a wide range of customers for several different reasons. You have to have a diversity of revenue for economic reasons, and you have to hedge your bets about when one thing goes up, something else may go down. So we just try to have that balance.
I love it. You talked about healthcare customers as well as some of the others. You always hear about healthcare seemingly having to, and just anything health related, not necessarily healthcare. I don't know. We spoke with someone once that was, they worked with the FDA, and it was like a mile long of things that had to be done to do anything. And so when you work with an entity that is highly regulated, how does that impact your team, so to speak, when it's like, well, you got this client and they're a lot easier to work with than this client because you just know going in there's going to be a lot more work than these. And not that the other one's easy, it's just one versus the other, right? Like one just inherently comes with more baggage, for lack of a better term.
Well, actually, what we find is that, we're either on the side of the regulator, either we're working for the regulator, because, as I said, federal agencies are our primary customer. So working in that environment, it's, there are a lot of regulations that we have to follow. We can't really talk about what we do, but to a certain degree, we can't tell who we're doing it for, that kind of thing. And that's fine. I mean, we certainly respect that. And then on the other side, as you mentioned, working for a pharmaceutical company that is heavily regulated, I would say for that, sometimes it slowed the pace because everything had to go through several layers of approval. And so we just had to be patient and figure out what else can we do while we're waiting on legal to approve something. And the legal review had much more input in those situations than any other customer we've had. So that was a learning experience for us as well. But we learn how to navigate it, and we hope that that experience will allow us to do some more work in the pharmaceutical industry or other heavily regulated industries.
So this brings up a great point that lots of entrepreneurs deal with, and that's the when things are slow. Maybe it's a client, maybe it's the regulations as you mentioned, and it's just a slow process, just by default for whatever reason. During those times, it can be hard to stay motivated or keep a team motivated to, it's like, ugh, right. And when you, especially if you see other things that are happening at a more efficient pace, how do you stay motivated and how do you keep your team motivated when the drudge comes in, so to speak?
Well, for the good or for the bad, we have most of our team members support multiple different projects. So if one is in a whole pattern, they have something else to work on in another project. And every project is different. Even if you're doing an evaluation for multiple customers, they're all going to look different. So that's really how the team stays motivated, during those down times is they just, they pick up other work. And if I know that they are not working, 100% on a particular project at a particular time, we may matrix them to help short term with another project until the other project picks back up. So that is one fortunate thing about having multiple different projects. I think at one time this year we had about 32 to 35 separate contracts. And so there's always opportunity to chip in on other projects.
Gotcha, gotcha. So it's not like there's one person dedicated to one contract. It's
Well, and that is the case. In some instances, that one person may be dedicated, but because we have about five core areas and they really complement each other. So if that one person is on pause, usually they're able to chip in either on another project or they look at that project and say, okay, we're waiting for legal on this aspect of it, but let's pick up on this other aspect. And we generally plan that out in the beginning. And the customers are really helpful to say, well, when we get to this part, it's going to be a 6 week pause. So let's run something else on this project parallel to that process so we don't have that downtime. So we are able to anticipate those downtimes, and then if they do happen and we are not aware of it, it catches us by surprise, then like I said, then we look for external opportunities to pitch in.
Love it. Love it. And I love the anticipation factor. It's such a great thing to think about in
Mhm,
business. Anticipate. Anytime we can anticipate, it's a beautiful thing.
mhm,
Let me ask you, one of the things I saw that was interesting was that you had served on many boards. I saw things like Georgia College, Emory, Land Bank Authority, some
mhm,
nonprofits. How does that experience, which it comes across to me as community leadership type roles,
mhm.
how does that serve you with what you're doing for your main business? Obviously, you get different perspectives when you're in that world and you see
Mhm.
things from different angles and hearing people that are in a totally different world expressing, what's important to them. How do you take all that and converge it together to make it effective for you?
In several ways. One, my father was a minister. My mother was a nurse and a teacher. So I have the heart of a nurse and the heart of a minister. So I'm very community
Mm.
minded. And so I certainly believe in the adage that says, "To whom much is given, much is required." So from the perspective of helping those organizations fulfill their mission, it fulfills me and it fulfills my own personal commitment to community. In terms of how it helps me in leadership, it helps me in two ways. One, it helps me to refine my leadership, and it helps me to understand from a 50,000 foot level. Okay, let's look at this from a policy perspective. What are some of the policies that we need to put in place to manage different situations. So I was able to see some of those things happen before I started my business. So I learned a lot from that. And then the other reality is, hopefully, I'm gaining new business through these relationships. So that's a third way that it benefits me, and that I'm able to bring that to my business, hopefully, new business.
I love it. And what I
Yeah.
got, and the other thing I got out of that was the title of the show. And you can hear it in when you're sharing. So I'm so glad you said that. To whom much is given, much is required. And you can hear it in your spirit, and I love that. And it's such a true thing when we sit down and we think for a moment. If we're an entrepreneur in the United States of America today, it's 2025, there's a lot already given by default. The opportunity is just so immense on what can be done. And I sometimes think, why do we as entrepreneurs struggle to believe we have much to give? So, for example, I'm in real estate. I guarantee you with 100% certainty, if we go do a real estate meeting and we say, okay, everyone has something to give, in particular, the newer investors are already thinking, what do I have to give? Right? I'm new. I don't know anything. What do I have to give? If I go to an entrepreneur meeting, the same thing will happen. I've sat in those entrepreneur meetings where someone who's uber successful is telling the group, everyone has something to give. My question to you is, why do entrepreneurs, in your experience, feel like they don't have something to give?
I think it's partly because we see these examples of these phenomenally successful businesses. And even though those are more rare than, the struggling or the not so struggling, but not, $1 billion business. And we seem to think, oh, well, they have it made. They have 10,000 people that are working for them. So, they have somebody to do the finances. They have somebody to do all the different aspects of their business. And so, unfortunately, we run our business like we run our personal lives. And so, if there's some aspect of the business that we're not comfortable with, Unfortunately, sometimes that's what we lead with, even though it may be
Mhm.
subconscious. So we may not think that we have anything to give. And I tell people a lot of times, you won't realize how much you have to give, usually until you leave that situation. You start talking to people, and you all of a sudden hear yourself giving all this advice and sharing all this experience. And you realize, wow, I have been through a lot. I've experienced a
Yeah,
lot and I have a lot to give.
yeah, yeah. Well, no, and I love that example. That's so true. You start talking about it, and all of a sudden, it's like, oh, who knew?
Right. Right.
I love it. I love it. When you think about your career to this point, what's a core lesson you wish your younger self knew sooner?
How to nurture relationships. So I'm great at meeting people. I wasn't always so great at just focusing on one or two people. So I may go to a reception and I would quote unquote work the room. I would leave with 20 cards. A year later, that same 20 cards was in the same stack they were that night. And
Hmm.
so I had to shift to saying, if I can do my homework in advance and say, okay, of the people that are going to be here, these are the three people that I really need to talk to, and here's what I need to talk to them about. Or if I can't do that, then I'll say, don't try to work the room. Just try to leave here with one solid connection that you've talked to long enough so that there's something that you can easily pick up on. Before I leave, I have already teed up the next conversation. I've said, oh, let's go play golf together. Let's have another conversation. Let's have tea. How can we work together? So you can't do that with 20 people. So that's one thing that I wish my younger self had known. It would save me a lot of space in my boxes that had all these cards stacked up. And then I would have a lot of guilt around not being able to follow up. But at some point, I just accepted that was unrealistic.
That is always the thing, right? So, what is you? It's easy to meet people. Building relationship takes time and effort. So now, fast forward. What's Melanie's secret to building relationships that are long lasting?
So I think one, first accepting that nobody has a lot of time. So I got rid of the guilt of, oh, I'm not calling this person, every month or whatever. So just staying in kind of a rhythm, but it's more natural. And allowing myself to remember birthdays, to remember anniversaries, and either text them, call them if I see something, if I see some type of interesting article, I can, forward it to them and just creating organic opportunities to engage. I think that's probably the thing that I do now the most. And I just try and find value. Everybody wants value, and I do too. So if someone brings me value in a conversation, I'm much more likely to remember them if I ever need their service.
Hmm. Do you think, kind of piggybacking on that idea of value, I think it's a great segue. As entrepreneurs, we know we need to bring value to people.
Mhm.
Do you think that this idea of value is pushed so heavily at times that we forget sometimes to appreciate the simple things? In other words, it's like, and I'm using going back to my real estate space. So I'm talking from my experience. It's like investor A does whatever, he does thing A, and it's valuable, but it's simple. It's not like impressive. It's not going to wow the world, but no question it provides value. But investor B does something that's more woo, right? Like more show worthy, for lack of a better term. But was it any more valuable than what investor A did? No, it really wasn't. Do you think value has almost become at times this thing where it's almost like we're judging it? that to the point where we lose track of, the simple things that get done, they're incredibly valuable too. In fact, if you're not sure, take them away and see what happens.
Right. Right. Well, and I think, in your example, real estate, value is like the cost of a house. It's what the market will bear. And so if, value is different things that some people may value, when I left that conversation, I felt a certain way. I felt an energy of trust. So I may not have left that person with any nuggets of information that they can use, but we just connected more. And so for me, that's value. That's a lot of value. So in all my conversations with potential customers, I don't always leave, 10 nuggets of wisdom. I just try to build a relationship of trust. And I think those have been my longer serving customers, the ones where I built that trust. And they know they can call me. I have one phone number and they can call me. I don't have a business phone number and a personal cell number. I have one number. So if they need to call me at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, 6 o'clock in the morning, they know they can call directly to me. And so that helps to build trust as well, to know that, even though we may have 100 people on our team, they still can call me. So, and that's a value in and of itself, because a lot of times those aren't the people that are executing every day anyway. They may be the account executive or the project officer on the other side. And so, but just knowing that, so you're right. I think sometimes the value in the sales world may be a little cliche. And so it's really figuring out what will be valuable to this person in this moment, right? And it may not always be the secret sauce to figuring out a problem, but it may be just letting them understand, hey, that's somebody I'd like to go talk to when I do have an issue or I need something.
Yes. And as you said that, the thought that popped in my head was arguably the most valuable thing we can give anyone is the value of connection. Some people may say, and so I say arguably that someone may feel differently. But I think that's, if it's not the most important, it's top three, right? The value of creating connection with our
Mhm, mhm.
fellow people.
Right.
But then I think about, and we've all had that experience, right? Where in the elevator, someone goes in, and sometimes people are like, are they going to talk to me? Right. Right. Or maybe we're the one and we're like, you know what? You feel like I'm in a great mood. I want to say hello. And that person's looking at you like, please don't speak to me. Like they're terrified of the idea. What do you find to be the most effective icebreakers that can help to connect with anyone?
Hmm. I usually just organically let it happen around something that I see or, maybe something they have on or, if we're going, if we both, let's say you're using your example, we both are on an elevator, we both press level 7. Oh, are you going to X, Y, and Z too? Okay, well, what brings you there today or whatever. I usually try and I am from a very small town. And so I try and create that non-threatening environment initially, so that people do feel comfortable talking to me. They know I'm not just, being nosy, but I'm just creating conversation and making them making them feel comfortable. The 40 so I think that's because I think that's what people crave. So even the person who doesn't want to talk, oftentimes it's not that they don't want to talk, it's that they may be afraid that they don't have anything to say that's worthwhile. And so just striking up a conversation about why you are there or what's your connection or something like that, just makes them feel comfortable.
You hit the nail on the head. People don't feel like they have something valuable. Kind of going back to what we were talking about, everyone has something to give, but yet so many people feel like they don't have anything to give.
Right.
And I love that. If we can make people feel like, yeah, you are valuable. Doesn't matter what you do, that you do have something to give. It's such a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
Mhm.
Let me ask you this. What's one of the biggest mistakes you've made that has propelled you forward the most?
Well, biggest mistakes. An inadvertent mistake was not getting treated earlier, or finding out what was the issue that later I found out was dyslexia and ADD. I was not diagnosed until I was 34. And today, issues like that are much more prevalent. People know them, schools know how to diagnose them, et cetera. They didn't really know how to diagnose it. They didn't really know how to identify it as much when I was coming through school. But I didn't spend a lot of time trying to figure out what was wrong because I didn't know there's something wrong with just me. I thought it was everybody. And so, like I said, it was an inadvertent mistake, but it gave me the grit that I use to propel myself in business and other things. And so once I did get diagnosed and I slowly kind of learned how to manage and turn those minuses into a plus, that has been extraordinary for me. Um, we have, as I mentioned, at one point, I think the highest number of contracts we had at the same time was 32. And so to talk about 32 different things at any moment, um, that's where my ability to focus on one thing for a moment, focus on something else and be okay with all that, it helps out a lot. So I use my ADD to my advantage in that sense.
Wow. So when you were first diagnosed,
Mhm.
like I'm just curious, what led you to get tested, I guess, for lack of a better term? And what was your reaction when they told you? Because up to that point, you were great, you were making things happen, knocking it out. Now you're in your 30s and you get told, oh, by the way.
Well, interestingly, it didn't quite happen that way.
Okay.
I was watching, I'm dating myself. I was watching an episode of The Cosby Show, and their son, Theo, was describing something that he was going through. And I can't remember if it was, I think it was dyslexia. And I just had an aha moment. I was like, oh my gosh, that's me.
Mm,
And so that's what really started the wheels turning in my head saying, well, maybe there's a label for this thing. And at some point, I was able to bring in the ADD. And so I didn't get an official diagnosis until after, so well after I saw that Cosby show, but just naming it and understanding that there was a force behind this. I think that because I wasn't in school anymore, I didn't feel a sense of urgency. And I didn't know that it was impacting my career so much. So it wasn't until I could see that connection between what was happening in my career, and the possible link between that and the learning issues that I went and got an official diagnosis and actually started working with professionals to help me manage
mm.
those conditions.
Isn't it amazing how life will sometimes throw us something completely unexpected that opens up a door we didn't even know existed?
Exactly. I love that. I love that about life.
It's always keeping us on our toes. We're never going to be bored. We shouldn't be
Mhm.
bored. How about
No,
that? So,
exactly. Exactly.
today you're leading companies, you're serving on boards, still making time for passions as well, though. I see you enjoy things like sailing, golf, fast cars. We got to talk about cars here in a moment. How do you, in a role like yours where you're working with people worldwide, high priority, security, and the number of things you mentioned, how do you manage creating time for those outlets as an entrepreneur? Because sometimes you hear the stories, I work 80 hours a week, 90 hours, 100 hours. It's like, right, the human body will give out at some point. So,
Exactly.
how do you make that happen for you?
Well, I think I did learn that at some points you do have to put in those long hours. And hopefully, you get to a point where you can delegate. I did get to that point. And I realized two things. One, all work and no play, burns you out very quickly. but it also, the things that I do outside of work fuel me. And so it makes me an exciting person. And I think that I attract what I reflect. So when I am presenting, when I'm attending a networking function or a convention, if I'm walking in with that level of confidence and energy, people want to talk to me and they want to see what's happening, in my world. And so if I'm burnt out and, I've worked all night for the last 5 nights, I'm not going to have that same level of energy. And so going out, doing interesting things, going out and playing at a new golf course or, going to a new wine tasting and, just having interesting things to talk about makes me more of an interesting, curious person. And so it helps a lot. And so I will remind myself, take that time, go see that play, go out with your girlfriends, do something fun so that you're interesting because nobody wants to talk to a boring person.
My wife has told me more than once, I must admit. She'll hear me start talking to someone and she'll be like, energy, energy, energy. She's like, if you don't have energy, they're not gonna exactly what you, but it's so true, right? Like when you have the initiative to give off energy first, people feed off of that.
Mhm.
But if you don't have energy, or if you're over, like I used to be very overly analytical, very left brain, still am, but I've
Mhm.
managed that better now. Where
Okay.
you're, but my default would be like the analysis of da 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 da, and you
Mhm.
like energy, that's secondary, right? So, and we had to realize, wait a second, not everyone thinks in an analytical way, but everyone can relate to energy.
Mhm.
And so when you're feeling, if you, when you're in business, you're running a company and things are dragging you down, we got to be able to turn that on for sure. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I do have to ask about the fast car though. Which cars do you like?
Anything that's fast, anything that's fast. I've always liked fast cars. I've ridden in race cars, a couple of times with professional race car drivers, and it's exhilarating, scary, but I know I'm safe. So it pushes me, but it gives me that adrenaline. So yeah.
Yeah,
So it's
they'll
not that I like any one particular kind. I like them all.
love it. So did you go like you mentioned professional drivers? I had that experience on a NASCAR track once. Did you have something like that?
Yeah, so I was actually down at Disney World. So I was attending a leadership convention in Disney World, and they brought in these race car drivers, and there's a racetrack there. And so part of our package, you could get a ride with a professional race car driver. And then about 3 years ago, right outside of Atlanta, there's this. It's kind of a recreational area where you can I think it's mainly for Porsche. I don't have one, but they can drive their Porsches as fast as they want to. And you can pay for a ride with one of the professional drivers. So I did that. So that was very recreational. It's not it's not NASCAR. It's just a bunch of folks that get together and love their cars and don't mind, other people riding.
Oh, it's that's a yeah, the Porsche Experience Center.
No, 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 not that one.
Oh no.
This is
Okay.
just right. That's more professional. This is actually north. I think it's in Brazelton or somewhere north of Atlanta. And I can't even remember the name of it, but it is they do racing there, but it's not NASCAR. It's just
Oh,
community racing.
Road Atlanta. I'm thinking
It could
probably.
be. I don't remember.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair.
Yeah.
You, I remember I got to ride with a professional driver once. My wife bought me this autocross thing, but it didn't work out. So they're like, "Hey, you want to ride in a stock car around
Mm,
Atlanta Speedway?" And I was like, "Sure."
okay.
And it was like really loud, and it was like, "Well, that looks
Yes.
cool." But when you're a passenger and you're like this sideways,
Yes.
and you're like
Yes.
the wall is like it looks like it's 12 inches away max, and the guy's going 180. I'm like, I don't know if I've ever prayed so hard in my life.
Exactly, exactly. Like you want to keep going, but you want to stop all at the same time.
Yes,
So I think it's a lesson in letting go and just, having faith in the process, as they say.
absolutely. In those moments, you feel very, very alive. My
Hmm.
question to you is, how do you take those moments where, and a fast car is a great example, you're feeling very alive, and then you come back to business and it's like, how do I replicate that level of aliveness? I just made that word up.
Well, I mean, I think that the business that I'm in, we have to write proposals. That's how we will work. So when you're working on these big proposals, there's a lot of adrenaline flowing because you're having to think of solutions. You're having to think of how can I make this different? How can I really tell our story to convince this customer that we can do this work? And so that's very exhilarating. Usually, when we finish with one of those big proposals, we all crash. You just have to crash
Yeah.
and start all over, but you have to recharge. So I would say that's very similar. Or when we win one and then you're off to start the contract, you're usually starting in a very short time frame. So you have to put together a team, you have to put together a work plan, you have to put together the team and figure out how they come together. And oftentimes they're not all in the same city. So all those things, even though I don't get involved as much in the day-to-day of that anymore, it's still exhilarating. I love kicking off contracts, especially with new customers, because I see it as an opportunity for us to bring them solutions and to show them, how we can do a great job. I
Mm.
love that.
Love it. Love it. Let me ask you two more things.
Sure.
And it kind of piggybacks off the idea of getting a new contract. For
Mhm.
entrepreneurs that are in a line of work that has the opportunity to work with government contracts,
Mhm.
but they're intimidated, maybe might be the right word, of the
Mhm.
idea, or maybe they're a little put off, they're not sure, they're hesitant. It's just like, I don't know. What's your message to them?
Messages, that's understandable. Anything new and unknown may bring some level of anxiety or anything like that. So I would say, in particular, if someone is interested in working with the federal government or even local government, go to your SBA office, the SBA centers. A lot of the larger universities have small business development centers, and or either the SCORE has different retired executives or business owners that can help you with a particular issue in the business. But if you go to a small business development center, they'll help you from start to finish. Okay, I want to get into government contracting. They have a lot of different classes. There are universities in just about every major city they are paid by the government to help. They used to be called PTEX, now they're called Apex centers, and they have government contracting 101, government contracting 102, how to write proposals. And they will assign you to a counselor, and that counselor will help walk you through those initial stages. So, whatever business you're trying to go into, whether it's government contracting or if you want to open up a hair salon or you want to open up a construction company or anything, an IT company, someone at the SBA can help you develop that business plan, help you figure out what's the best type of financing to obtain to start and run and manage the business. So I would say look for those resources, whether it's a SBA, whether it's a woman-owned small business center. There are just so many different resources out there, Frank. But so many people don't know about them, and they don't know how to access them. And some of them are free, are very low cost.
Mm, love it. No, that's true. And there's always more seemingly coming online.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
so many ways to learn nowadays, and there's just the amount of data out there is like it's breathtaking, right? Can't take it all in, of course. So love it. So one more question. At this point in your
Sure.
career, how do you define success?
So. I define success as doing better than I did the last year and going wider and going deeper. And so the final component of success for me is how many people have I brought along? How many small businesses have I supported to help them grow? How many people have I hired that were able to go on and get better jobs, more senior jobs, because of the experience and the exposure that they received at my company? So that's something that's very important to me, because it's not just about me. Once again, going back to my DNA of being a preacher's daughter and a nurse's daughter and having that
Mm.
heart and that spirit of giving, and making sure, because I was given a lot. And because of the last company that I worked for, I was able to start this company. So I want other people to be able to do the same thing.
Love it. Love it. Good stuff. Well, Melanie, I want to thank you for coming on today. Just a very fascinating conversation and thoughts, and I appreciate you sharing them. Is a lot of what you do is stuff I'm not even remotely familiar with, so it's very educational as well. So I appreciate you sharing today. So thank you again, and to our listeners, if you want to follow Melanie, connect with Melanie, we'll have the links below on her company and social media, so you can check out what she's doing because she's doing a lot of stuff. And it's pretty cool and very enlightening and eye opening. Some good stuff. So I want to thank you again, Melanie, for coming on. I
Thank
greatly
you.
appreciate it. Can you leave us with a final word?
I'll leave that word, grit. That it's something that you can't go out and buy it. It's experiential. And we all have challenges, and those challenges, that's what creates, that turns a rock into a diamond. And so don't run from the challenges, embrace them because you know that you're being prepared for something greater and bigger.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you for sharing that, and thank you again. And I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Frank.